Hello and welcome or welcome back to Baking Q&A with myself, Faye, and my partner, Rob.
Hello, everyone.
So we're going to be answering, or I'll be answering, more questions that Rob has compiled for me.
Yep, these are questions that we've either had sent in to us or we've just found that are commonly being asked by people who are baking cakes at home as enthusiasts or as part of their home baking business.
Great.
So let's get started. So, commonly asked question: a lot of people master doing a particular sponge recipe, and it's their go-to sponge recipe for doing stuff, and they think, actually, I want to use that for lots of different cakes and lots of different flavors. Is it as simple as just changing flavors of a sponge recipe and using it for other cakes that they might want to make?
Not always.
Okay.
For example, if you're going to change spices, that's an easier one. But so let's say, for example, it's a vanilla cake. Then you want to make it a cardamom cake. You can then swap out the vanilla and replace cardamom. Obviously, it doesn't mean that if it's a teaspoon of cardamom, it's a teaspoon of vanilla, for example. That's something you're going to have to trial and test. If you are going to make a chocolate cake, some sponge cakes, you can remove flour and then add cocoa powder. But that's, for example, if you're making a Genoese. I would never do that with like a Victoria sponge cake recipe, because if you change a dry ingredient, you might have to change a fat. It becomes all quite technical and complicated. So no, so one recipe fits all is not entirely correct.
There are different sponges for different purposes, different qualities, and they're designed in a certain way to work in that way, not by substituting other ingredients.
Yes,
yeah,
that's right.
Okay.
And if you want to know all about the different sponges, I think I'm going to write a guide on this, because that's quite a complex.
They go on forever, really, don't they?
But then what I see is a lot of people are not using the correct sponges sometimes for a particular cake. And then they say, oh, that's a really dry sponge. So, for example, if you're using a Genoese sponge, you have to have a soaking syrup and you need to have a wet filling on that, like a whipped cream. So, yeah, there's a lot of technical things that go on with different sponges. So, we might write a guide on that.
Yes, okay. Another common question we come across a lot is cake portions out of different sizes of cakes. And people are often surprised, I think, about how much you can actually get out of a cake. So is there some sort of guide you can give for taking, say, a 6-inch round cake, portion sizes, how you might work that out?
So this is obviously this is a question that would be useful for anybody baking cakes and wants to, you want to know how many portions. But I think this is also an incredibly important question for people who are selling cakes. When I'll give an example first. When I used to do novelty cakes so many years ago, I was very transparent with my customers, because people don't understand how much cake you can actually get out of a cake, how many portions you can get out of a cake. So I always used to tell my customers and explain the cutting guide, because most of the time they actually needed a much smaller cake, and that also meant a cheaper cake for them, and they were actually very appreciative, and that meant return business. So that's just a little tip. So I'm going to give an example using a 6-inch cake, round cake. And you would think, oh, 6 inches, how small? So there are different ways of cutting a cake. You can cut what I call a traditional way in triangles. So if you wanted large portion sizes out of a 6-inch, cut in that manner, you'd have 8 large portions. If you wanted slimmer portions, you'd get 12, which is still quite a lot. Now, if you are cutting coffee-sized portions, which is what we would measure 1 inch by 1 inch on the top, so a little square. But we have to remember, most of these cakes nowadays are like 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 inches tall. So you would end up with 26 portions, 1 inch squared, which we call coffee portion. If you want dessert portion, which is a 2 inch by 1 inch, you end up with 13 on the top. That's 13 portions. Now, if you've got a double-barreled cake, let's say you want coffee portions of a double-barrel 6-inch cake. Out of a 6-inch cake, you get 52 portions
Of which one now?
of a 6-inch cake,
Yeah.
which is double barrel. What do I mean by double barrel? So you have, for example, either 4 slices of cake
Yeah.
or 6 slices of cake with frosting in between. You will cut the cake,
Yeah.
and then 1 slice becomes 2 portions
Right.
because you have equal frosting and equal cake.
Right.
And that's what you do with like a novelty style cake or wedding cake. So you don't need, huge cakes for a small number of people. And you can get also a large number of cake with a small cake.
Yeah.
Yeah, portions of cake for a small.
Yeah. So just to summarize those portion sizes, you've got a dessert portion, a coffee portion, and party size. And those three.
So you've got either, traditional triangles.
Yeah.
You've got the large size, and then you've got the smaller portions, or you've got square or rectangle portions. So you've got your coffee portion, which is 1 inch squared, and then you've got your dessert portion, which is 2 by 1 inch.
Okay.
And then obviously depending on the height of the cake. So people who are, doing 10-inch cakes, 12-inch cakes, and then tiered cakes are for wedding cakes. You'll be feeding a lot of people.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's important to familiarize yourself with cutting guides.
Okay. This possibly might be, well, we just come across it a lot, and a lot of people ask questions and about sinking sponges. They take the sponge out of the oven, and it's just like this. Why is that?
I would say the most common thing I see is I think people are just taking them out too early. And I'm not just saying I think, because I have interacted with people and asked questions, how long did you bake that cake? What size is that cake? And they say 25, 35 minutes because that's what the recipe stated. So I think that is one of the most common issues. The other issue is that you might have too much sugar or too little sugar.
Mm.
Or again, it could be a different, the recipe is not right. So the ratios of fat, sugar, these all play a role in baking a cake. So if the recipe is not right, that could cause it. And I think a lot of people just take out a cake too early.
Mm. And that's, I suppose, a lesson in either knowing your oven or just recognizing that baking times are a guide only. They can only ever be a guide.
I always think that I've read, obviously, I would say thousands of baking recipes that they are normally under, not over, as in time-wise. And some people have fan ovens, other people don't have fan ovens, so you have convection and convention ovens. So obviously that temperature is not the same. It is advisable to invest in an oven thermometer. They're not expensive, and then you know exactly what your oven runs on. Mm-hmm. And always take a note. So if you're baking a cake for the first time and your cake has sunk, let's say at 25 minutes, bake that cake again and give it another maybe 10, 15 minutes and keep note. If the same thing keeps on happening, I would say it's a recipe issue. And if obviously if you had a successful bake, you know that you just need to bake your cake for longer.
There's also that feature, the excitement of baking cakes, and people sometimes are a bit too eager to open the oven door, and that has an effect.
Yeah, it does. If you open it just too early, it's going to sink. Another thing I have to say on this is that if a recipe says this recipe is baked in a 6-inch round tin, 4 inches high, that time is for that size of cake. So if you had to double that cake quantity, it's not going to be 25 minutes. You're going to have to work out how much extra you need to add to that baking time. If you decided to bake that batter in 2 lower tins, you might have to then bake it less. So you've got to take a note of the size of the cake tin and then the quantity of the batter.
Measuring ingredients. Obviously in the States, there's a lot of recipes are by volume with cups.
Yes.
Over here, weight, grams, or the old imperial measurements. What's your favorite way for measuring and why?
definitely by weight. So it is really worth investing in a weighing scale, a set of scales, because
Digital scales.
they're accurate. You know that you are using exactly the same amount of ingredients every time you bake said cake or whatever you are making. So then you always have consistency in a recipe. For example, certain cakes, if you're a little bit over and a little bit under, like for like high fat, high sugar ratio cakes, I don't think that has a big issue. And those are those tend to be the cakes that are baked in America with a lot of liquid. I think they're much more forgiving.
Yeah.
If you're going to make a Genoese sponge, for example, there's certain things you need to have the right measurement. Also, if you are running a baking business, for pricing your ingredients, you should be down to the gram. So that's really important. So you know exactly how much goes into a particular recipe, and also then that means you can be more organized and you know how much ingredients or how much flour you need to order and have. So you can work out things much easier by weight.
Decorating cakes, some alternatives without buying sort of ready-made stuff or stuff that may be made with artificial colors and flavors. Some good alternatives, that natural produce that people can use to decorate cakes,
instead
pretty them up.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Instead of shop bought ready stuff.
So you can obviously use candied peel, like citrus peel. So you can candy your own oranges, lemons, which obviously give color. They also add texture and they add flavor. So nuts, just toasted nuts are wonderful. They add, again, flavor and crunch.
On that with nuts, I mean, we've spoken about this before. Toasting nuts is really important.
Yes. So when you toast nuts, it brings out the flavor. And what you don't want to do is toast them too much, because then they turn bitter. But toast them on a low temperature, it's around 140 to 150 degrees Celsius, for about 20 minutes. If it's a whole nut, it depends on the size of the nut. So this is something you've just got to play around with. Another point on nuts, you can candy or caramelize them. So you cover them and cook them in sugar. So that adds a bit of a sweetness to them and an additional crunch. That's also a good. You can also then process them in the hand blender or a mixer, until they turn into a butter. And then you can actually pipe that on. So you've got like a nut butter that goes onto your cake.
And really, it's about looking for or using these sorts of items of decoration to complement the cake that you're making.
Yes, edible flowers are very pretty. Again, they're edible, but they don't taste good, but they're very pretty. You can use cake crumbs like they normally do with a red velvet cake. So you can add crumbles on top. You can make your own decorations, as in, if you like, instead of shop bought cookies, you can make your own cookies and cut them out in cute shapes and put them on. Those are just some ideas.
Okay.
It's a never-ending list.
And buttercream.
Oh yeah.
So I mean, again, it's a huge topic, but just on this particular issue, colouring buttercream and flavouring it, what's the best way to go about doing this?
So my personal opinion, because I don't bake with artificial colour or flavour, I've stopped using colour. I used to use it when I used to make novelty cakes, but you can use powdered freeze-dried fruit, which they're fantastic because they give you quite bright colours, but that you obviously will have the flavour of that. So it's not just the colour, you have flavour. Those are great. I think there are some companies out there that are starting to do more natural, so definitely look for those that don't have
fruit purees, and that's
you can use fruit purees. They're not as vibrant, but you can color a cream, a buttercream, a pastry cream with them.
Is it in danger of going a bit soft when you use the puree or not, or is it okay provided you get the proportions right?
yes, you have to be careful, because if you add too much, you would. So it might, so for example, if you use strawberry doesn't make anything red. It makes go brown. So if you're looking to do something pink or red, I don't advise like a puree. Now, if you add a freeze-dried strawberry, you might get the color. So you're not going to get the colors that you get out of a food coloring. So there's a bit of trial and error again with that one.
Okay. Well, I think that's our questions for this week.
So if you have any more baking questions, anything baking, doesn't matter if they're really simple ones or more complex, please send them in, and we'll answer them on the next episode. Thank you very much, and don't forget to subscribe. Bye.